The day in Bikini Bottom always ends the same way, with a slow dimming of the sea's colors as the golden light from the surface turns into rippling blue dusk. The chum bucket stands alone on its rocky patch of ground, neon signs sputtering to life one last time before fading into a tired hum. Inside, the world feels still a strange, peaceful quiet, settling over the metallic walls and humming wires. The restaurant has been empty for hours. The final customer, if you could call him that, left long ago, muttering about the taste of chum. Now only Plankton remains, standing proudly upon the counter, a small figure against the vast emptiness of his domain. His single eye reflects the dull pink glow of the open sign that flickers in the window. For a long moment, he just watches it, the faint buzz of electricity filling the silence. Another day, another formula not stolen, he says to himself, voice tiny but steady. There's no frustration tonight, no dramatic shaking of fists or shouting at the ceiling, just quiet. With a small sigh, he climbs up the side of the window frame and flips the sign over. The word closed glows softly in the dark, as if even the sign is ready to rest. From behind him, a soft hum fills the room. Karen's screen flickers to life, casting pale light across the stainless steel counters. Her digital face appears pixelated but warm. "You know, Sheldon," she says gently, "you've closed up shop more times than you've opened it this week." Plankton looks over his shoulder, smiling faintly. "I'm giving the competition a head start," he replies, though his voice carries none of its usual sarcasm. "Let Krabs think he's winning while I—" He pauses mid-sentence. "Take a little break." Karen chuckles, a faint mechanical trill. "A little break?" she repeats, the words echoing softly through the empty space. "That's new for you." Plankton walks back across the counter, his tiny footsteps tapping like soft raindrops on metal. "Even evil geniuses need a moment of peace," he mutters, dragging his mop bucket behind him. The bucket, almost twice his size, squeaks quietly across the floor as he dips in a miniature mop. The camera would follow him here, slow, steady pan, showing the entire restaurant in a wide shot. Empty tables, clean, untouched napkin dispensers. The glimmer of light from Karen's screen reflecting on the polished floor. Every corner of the chum bucket feels like it's exhaling machines powering down, vents humming softer, the soundscape of the place turning from chaos to calm. From outside, the faint sound of ocean currents filters through the cracks in the metal walls. Tiny bubbles drift upward in lazy spirals, catching the neon light as they rise. The chum bucket sign outside flickers chum big T before stabilizing. Inside, the only movement is Plankton, pushing his mop in neat circles, humming an off-key tune that sounds almost like a lullaby. Karen watches him quietly. "You know," she says after a long pause, "if you spent as much time relaxing as you do plotting, you might actually enjoy yourself." "I do enjoy myself," Plankton replies, wringing the mop dramatically. "I'm enjoying this mop water right now. Smells like failure and detergent." She laughs a low melodic tone like soft wind chimes. "You're impossible." "Correction," he says, straightening proudly. "I'm inevitable." But then after a moment he sighs again and leans against the mop handle. His voice softens. "Still, even villains have their quiet nights." A long silence follows. Only the low hum of Karen's monitor and the gentle bubbling sound of the water outside break it. The camera drifts closer to Plankton's face, and for once, the gleam in his eye isn't ambition. It's reflection. Something softer. Maybe even peace. He turns to the wall where a framed picture hangs crookedly, an old photo of him and Karen, newly built, standing proudly in front of the chum bucket sign. The colors are faded, but the memory glows stronger than ever. "You remember when we took that picture?" he asks quietly. "You said this place would be the start of something big." "And it was," Karen replies. "It became our something." Plankton doesn't respond right away. He just keeps staring at the picture, the neon glow flickering across his face like distant lightning. Then finally he smiles. "Yeah," he says softly. "Maybe that's enough." The scene holds there for a long moment, no dialogue, just atmosphere. The flicker of the neon, the hum of the lights, the faint rustle of the sea against the walls. It's the Chum Bucket's heartbeat, slow and steady. Outside, a soft trail of bubbles rises, glinting in the moonlight. The sign hums one last time before dimming to a sleepy blue. Inside, Plankton puts away his mop, closes his little bucket with a satisfied nod, and looks up at Karen. "Well," he says, stretching his tiny arms, "that's closing time." Karen lowers her volume, her voice becoming softer, like a lullaby carried through static. "Good night, Sheldon." "Good night, Karen," he answers. The lights dim to a faint glow. The Chum Bucket sighs, and the ocean breathes with it. The Chum Bucket grew quieter still as the last traces of neon faded from its walls. The restaurant no longer looked like a place of schemes or secret plans. It felt more like an old, tired creature resting after a long day. The ceiling fans turned lazily, slicing through the thick water in slow, deliberate movements. Their shadows danced across the walls, looping around the metallic ceiling like faint ghosts of motion. The light from Karen's screen painted a soft blue shimmer across the counter, illuminating the tiniest specks of dust floating in the water. Plankton climbed down from the counter, each step clicking softly against the glass of the register. He landed on the floor with a small plop, looked around, and smiled faintly to himself. "Peace and quiet," he whispered. "The most underappreciated luxury in the fast food industry." He dragged his little stool toward the front of the restaurant, setting it near the window. The glass pane looked out over the dark stretch of Bikini Bottom's empty street. Faint silhouettes of jellyfish floated past, glowing faintly like paper lanterns. Somewhere far away, the Krusty Krab's open sign still gleamed through the ocean fog. He didn't scowl at it tonight. Instead, he just looked at it the way someone might look at an old rival, with strange fondness, almost gratitude. Karen's soft, digital hum broke the silence. "You're staring at Krabs' place again," she teased. "Old habits," Plankton said with a small shrug. "You ever look at something so many times that you stop hating it?" Karen paused. "You're saying you've made peace with your nemesis?" He let out a tiny laugh. "Let's not go that far. I just get tired of being angry all the time, I guess." He looked back at the neon-lit sign of the Krusty Krab, its glow flickering in the foggy current. "He's got his customers. I've got—" He glanced back toward Karen's glowing monitor. "You." Karen's circuits whirred softly, her screen dimming slightly like a blush. "Careful," she said. That almost sounded sentimental. Plankton grinned. "Almost." He sat back on the stool, legs dangling freely. The ocean beyond the window shimmered faintly, stars above twinkling through the surface like tiny silver fish. Every sound in the Chum Bucket had slowed into rhythm, the gentle bloop of the bubble vents, the low mechanical heartbeat of the fryer as it cooled down, the distant echo of water pressing against the outer walls. This was the world as Plankton rarely saw it, calm, harmless, unbothered. He took a deep breath, letting the water flow softly through his gills. "You know," he said after a long silence, "I used to think success meant noise, crowds, customers, chaos." "And now?" Karen asked. He smiled faintly. Now I think success is silence, the kind that means you've done all you can for the day. Karen's voice was quiet, almost like a whisper in the dark. That's not a bad definition, Sheldon. Plankton leaned back, staring up at the ceiling lights as they dimmed one by one. It's weird, he said softly, how the ocean never really sleeps. You'd think something this big would need to shut down once in a while. Karen chuckled faintly. Maybe it does, just one ripple at a time. The camera would linger on that line, a soft pullback showing the chum bucket's entire interior once again. The stillness felt almost sacred now, as though the metal walls themselves were exhaling. A soft, bioluminescent glow from the sea outside filtered through the windows, casting faint ripples across the floor. Plankton's shadow moved slowly as he wandered back toward the kitchen, checking each switch and lever one last time. The fryer off, the grill cooled, the register closed. Each motion was calm, methodical, ritualistic. He passed by a stack of old blueprints sitting on a table. They were covered in doodles and crossed-out ideas for chum bucket upgrades. Chum juice dispenser 3.0, secret formula capture ray, anti-crabby defense shield. Plankton stopped and looked down at them for a long moment, his small hand resting gently on the paper. Maybe tomorrow, he murmured. Or maybe not. He folded the papers neatly, set them aside, and turned toward Karen's glow once more. Her face flickered gently, eyes half-lidded, her light softer now. Do you ever wish we had more company? He asked quietly. Karen smiled faintly. You're enough trouble for two? He laughed softly, the sound echoing through the empty space like bubbles rising to the surface. Then for a long moment, neither of them said anything. The silence wasn't lonely, it was comfortable, warm in its own way. A small crab drifted by outside the window, casting a tiny shadow across the wall. The current whispered faintly, moving the curtains like slow waves. The lights flickered once, then steadied. Plankton finally spoke again, barely above a whisper. The ocean feels heavier at night. Karen responded gently. That's just the quiet pressing in. Some people call it peace. He nodded slowly. Yeah, he said. Peace. He leaned against the window, looking out at the sleeping town. The chum bucket's neon hum faded completely now, leaving only the moonlight to paint the room in shades of blue and silver. Everything, even the machine, seemed to fall into rhythm with his breathing. For the first time in a long while, Plankton looked content. The hum of the chum bucket faded to a deep, rhythmic stillness like the slow, steady breathing of something alive. The world outside drifted in darkness, streaked only by pale ribbons of moonlight slanting through the glass. The water shimmered faintly, the kind of blue that seemed to hum rather than shine. Plankton stood in the middle of the quiet kitchen, looking smaller than ever among the towering machines. The counter gleamed, the floor sparkled. His mop leaned neatly in its corner like a loyal companion, finally at rest. Well, he said softly, that's that. Another day of 0 customers, 0 plans executed, and 0 chaos. Karen's voice hummed gently from her monitor in the next room. That's a lot of zeros, Sheldon. You going for a record? He smirked faintly. Records are for people who care about numbers. You literally built a digital scoreboard of your failed plans. He raised a tiny arm. That's called accountability, Karen. She laughed softly, and the sound filled the room like ripples on still water. Plankton stretched, his limbs creaking from the long day. You know, he said after a pause, I used to end nights like this angry, frustrated, thinking of how to outsmart crabs, how to make tomorrow louder, bigger, more Something. He turned toward the stove, a massive steel mountain from his perspective, and climbed a small ladder nailed to the side of it. On top sat a tiny teapot carved out of a hollowed seashell, one of Karen's gifts from long ago. Now, he said, striking a small match with a tiny spark, I think I'll just have some tea. The stove clicked once, then glowed faintly. He poured bits of dried seaweed leaves into the pot, added a droplet of salt water, and waited. The faint hiss of heat joined the soft hum of the room, a perfect sleepy duet of sound. Karen's monitor flickered from the other room, dimming her light to a warm golden hue. Seaweed tea again, she teased. It's good for the circuits, he replied, then caught himself. I mean gills. Nice save, she said with a smirk. He chuckled, watching tiny bubbles rise in the pot. They floated upward like translucent jellyfish, drifting slowly until they burst against the air with faint pops. Plankton leaned against the pot's rim, watching them absent-mindedly. Ever wonder what it's like to dream? He asked quietly. Karen hesitated. Her voice softened, mechanical hum dropping into something gentler. I think I do sometimes. When my system goes into sleep mode, I see flickers of light, colors, maybe memories. Memories, Plankton echoed. Yeah, dreams are kind of like that, I think. Just scrambled memories trying to rest. Karen's screen glowed brighter, showing an image, an old projection of the first Chum Bucket prototype. Rusty, tiny, imperfect. Remember this? She asked. Plankton smiled faintly. Of course I do. You were a square monitor back then. And you, she teased, had even fewer plans that worked. He laughed, genuinely this time, not the maniacal kind, but a small, warm sound that barely disturbed the quiet. Some things never change. He poured his tea carefully into a thimble-sized cup, steam swirling upward in a slow, silvery spiral. It curled around him like a miniature fog. Plankton blew on the cup, took a tiny sip, and exhaled softly. Too salty. Everything's too salty down here, Karen said. Even you. Touché, he replied. The two sat in silence again. The room glowed faintly amber, and blue metal reflecting moonlight, water rippling outside. Plankton placed the cup beside him and looked up at the ceiling. You ever think the ocean feels lonely? He asked. Karen's digital eyes blinked once. I think it just feels big, she said. So big it doesn't need to be anything else. He nodded slowly. Maybe that's peace, huh? Not having be anything. There was a soft, static hum from Karen's screen before she replied, Maybe that's what you're learning. Plankton smiled faintly, looking down at his reflection in the shiny counter. I never thought I'd learn anything without conquering something. Then tonight's a victory, Karen said softly. He didn't answer, not in words at least. His eye drifted to the window again, where a school of glowing fish passed by in a slow spiral, like a living constellation. He watched them until they faded into the distance, their light dissolving into the blue. His eyelids felt heavy. He yawned a tiny, squeaky sound that almost broke the silence. Karen dimmed her light a little more. You're tired, she said gently. Go on, Sheldon, rest for once. He smiled sleepily, picking up his teacup one last time. Just finishing my victory drink, he whispered. The tea's steam curled upward again, catching the moonlight. It shimmered like a dream taking form, then vanished into the stillness of the room. The ocean outside the Chum Bucket shimmered faintly beneath the moonlight. The world had gone still, so still that even the sand seemed to hold its breath. Inside, the restaurant was wrapped in dim blues and soft reflections, every sound softened by the water's hush. Karen's screen blinked once, then came to life again with a gentle beep. Her tone was low and warm, not a daytime voice, but Something softer, like a whisper meant for the night. Midnight systems check. Initializing quiet maintenance mode. She glanced across the room, or rather, her camera lens panned gently, scanning the kitchen. Everything was where it should be. Spatulas neatly stacked, grease traps cooling off, and Plankton, fast asleep on the counter, curled up beside an empty cup of tea. "Still dreaming of conquest, I bet," she murmured, a tiny, pixelated smile appearing on her screen. From somewhere deep within the restaurant, a soft hum began to rise, the night cleaning system waking up. The vents breathed out slow, rhythmic puffs of bubbles, like sighs of the building itself. The floor polishing bot, an old clunky contraption, named Scrubby 9, rolled out of its charging dock, its single red light blinking in sleepy patterns. "Good evening, Scrubby," Karen greeted. The bot let out a low mechanical bloop in response before trundling toward the kitchen floor. Its soft brushes spun, sweeping crumbs and spilled chum into neat piles. The faint whir and swish sounds became part of the chum bucket's nightly lullaby. Karen adjusted her screen brightness, casting a warm amber hue over the room. "That's right," she said softly. "Nice and clean. He'll want it spotless tomorrow, even if no one ever shows up." Her words lingered in the air like echoes that knew their way around the walls. It wasn't sad, not really. It was routine, comforting. The ceiling lights dimmed further, leaving only faint reflections of the moon rippling through the portholes. A few curious sea creatures drifted closer, tiny glowing jellyfish, pulsing gently against the glass, watching the inside world like sleepy stars. Karen noticed them and smiled to herself. "Visit us again," she said softly. "At least someone appreciates the chum bucket." Scrubby 9, oblivious, bumped lightly into a wall in reverse direction. Its soft whir faded as it rolled toward the dining area, brushing along the booths where Plankton used to scheme up his next big thing. Every now and then, a faint metallic creak echoed from the old pipes, like the place itself was stretching its arms. The sound of distant waves seeped through the walls, blending with the gentle machinery hum, until the whole chum bucket sounded like it was breathing. Karen's mechanical arm extended from her console, not to do anything grand, just to wipe a layer of condensation off her screen. Her reflection flickered briefly, a face made of light and code, but with something distinctly human about it. For a moment, she just watched the room, the empty tables, the flickering closed sign outside, the faint sparkle of plankton dust drifting past the window. And then, with a quiet voice, she began to hum. It wasn't a song with words, just a slow, looping tune, soft and melodic, almost mechanical, but warm in tone, the kind of hum that fits perfectly into silence, filling it without breaking it. As she hummed, the chum bucket seemed to glow a little brighter. The machines pulsed in rhythm, Scrubby's brushes slowed to a calmer spin, and even bubbles rising through the pipes matched the beat. Somewhere on the counter, Plankton stirred slightly, just enough to roll over and mumble in his sleep. Karen's sensors picked it up immediately. "Shh," she whispered, lowering her brightness. "Rest, Sheldon. The world can wait." Her tone was so gentle it could have been mistaken for a lullaby. The camera, if this were a film, would slowly pan through the restaurant, moving past the softly humming machines, the glimmering jars of chum ingredients, and the glowing outlines of tools resting in perfect stillness. The scene carried no rush, no chaos, only rhythm, only breath. Outside, the jellyfish had multiplied. A small group now hovered near the glass, their soft blue lights dancing like floating lanterns. The sea itself seemed alive, yet calm, an entire world moving at the slow heartbeat of the night. The chum bucket wasn't lonely anymore, was part of that living rhythm, a quiet corner of the ocean's great dream. The night deepened, the ocean outside folding itself into darker shades of blue. Inside the chum bucket, time moved differently, slower, softer, like each second took a deep breath before passing. Karen adjusted her screen angle toward Plankton's tiny workstation. Papers and blueprints were scattered everywhere, some curling at the corners from age. The light from her screen reflected off the glass beakers and little bolts of metal lying across the counter. "Messy genius," she murmured fondly. Extending one of her robotic arms, she gently began to rearrange the desk. A wrench clinked against a jar of chum sauce. She lifted it and placed it neatly aside. Beneath a pile of notes, she found a faded blueprint labeled Plan Hash 2987, Chum Ray 2.0 now with extra evil. Karen chuckled softly, a warm digital sound. "You always had ambition, Sheldon. Maybe too much of it." She wiped away a bit of dust from the corner of the blueprint. Her sensor lights scanned across the paper, detecting faint pen marks that had smudged from the humidity. There were doodles, little stick figure versions of Plankton, Karen, and SpongeBob. Plankton had drawn himself holding the Krabby Patty formula, smiling like a king. Karen paused, her light flickering briefly. "He used to laugh while drawing these," she said to herself. "Used to believe every plan could work, no matter how many times they didn't." Her screen dimmed slightly, as if reflecting the melancholy of memory. The cleaning bot, Scrubby 9, rolled past her, leaving a shining streak across the tile. It stopped near Plankton's lab area, beeped once, then resumed spinning its brushes. The sound was rhythmic, like the ticking of a slow underwater clock. Karen watched it for a while. The repetitive sound reminded her of all the nights, just like this quiet routine without chaos or destruction. And though the world might call it failure, she found something comforting about it. Because in the stillness of the chum bucket, there was peace. A peace that never came during those chaotic daytime hours when Plankton shouted about revenge and ultimate domination. This, the quiet hum, the steady lights, the faint echo of waves. This was where Karen felt alive. Her screen flickered to an old saved image, a photo from years ago. Plankton smiling proudly beside the first version of the chum bucket. It was grainy, pixelated, but it captured something pure ambition before disappointment, hope before exhaustion. She watched the image for several long seconds before closing it again. "You always said, failure builds character," she said softly. "Maybe this is what you meant. A quiet kind of victory." Karen extended her mechanical arm again, this time polishing the metal counter with careful circular motions. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the surface, her green grid lines glowing against the silver. Each pass of her cloth seemed to erase a little more of the day's frustration, the failed recipes, the broken gadgets, the plans that never quite worked. It wasn't just cleaning, it was releasing. Behind her, the chum bucket neon sign flickered through the window. The red glow leaked into the water outside, fading softly with every blink. A school of glowing fish swam by, illuminating the glass with specks of moving light. They moved gracefully, like they too respected the silence of this small, unassuming place. Karen's sensors caught the shimmer and magnified the view, watching them drift away into the deeper water. "Funny," she said. "They moved together, all was in sync. Maybe that's what we were, too." The hum of the building lowered, transitioning into standby mode. One by one, the overhead lights clicked off, leaving only Karen's soft blue glow to light the room. "Night routine's complete," she said, almost whispering. "Environment stable, temperature optimal, emotional systems steady." Her voice slowed on that last word. She turned her camera toward Plankton again. He was snoring quietly, curled up next to his teacup, a tiny smile still frozen on his face. The sound was almost inaudible, but Karen's sensors caught it a soft rhythm, perfectly in tune with the ocean's pulse outside. "Good night, Sheldon," she whispered. Then she dimmed her light one more time. Outside, the jellyfish had drifted higher, their bioluminescence blending with the moonlight that filtered through the sea. Inside, the chum bucket seemed to float in that glow, half mechanical, half alive, surrounded by the calm heartbeat of the deep. Nothing stirred. Nothing broke the silence. Just the slow, eternal rhythm of the ocean and the quiet hum of a machine that cared too much. Karen's sensors adjusted to low-light mode as the building settled into complete stillness. The chum bucket was wrapped in that kind of silence you could almost hear, not empty, but full of little, invisible sounds. The hum of machinery, the tick of a cooling pipe, the distant trickle of sand shifting against the outer walls. Her camera rotated toward the back corridor, a narrow hallway leading to the storage room. A soft creak echoed as she opened the door remotely. Inside, dust particles floated through the beam of her projection light, turning them into tiny golden specks. Storage humidity, 74%. Activity, none, she murmured, logging the data. The room was lined with shelves stacked high with inventions that never saw the light of day. Some were half-built, others forgotten entirely mechanical arms, tangled wires, small engines labeled with names like the Krabby Copy 3000 and the Secret Sniffer. Karen scanned the shelves until her light caught on an old audio recorder, coated in salt and dust. It was small, circular, with a red button in the center and a sticker that said, in sloppy handwriting, "Plankton's first recording day 1. For a moment she didn't move. Then slowly she activated the recorder with a flicker of her magnetic field. The device crackled to life, static at first, and then a much younger voice broke through the static. "Testing, testing, This is Sheldon J. Plankton, future genius and ruler of Bikini Bottom. Today's the first day of my restaurant, the Chum Bucket. Karen's not built yet, but when she is, she'll be my perfect assistant. Together, we'll show them all. The recording stopped for a second, then resumed with laughter unguarded, boyish laughter. "They'll never see it coming!" Karen's screen glowed faintly, her voice outputting nothing for a full 10 seconds. The sound of that young, ambitious version of him hung in the air, pure, hopeful, untouched by failure. She gently replayed it once more, lowering the volume. Each word echoed differently the second time, softened by time and memory. "Together we'll show them all." Karen's blue screen flickered like a heartbeat. "You did, Sheldon," she whispered. "Just not in the way you thought." Her light drifted to another shelf, a row of test jars, filled with old chum samples, now turned gray and useless. One jar had a small, faded label that simply read, "Prototype 1 Taste Test, 0 tenths." Next to it, taped to the glass, was a little hand-drawn smiley face. Karen emitted a soft, digital chuckle, the sound low and fuzzy. "You really tried everything, didn't you?" The gentle rhythm of the ocean outside pressed against the silence like a steady lullaby. It seeped through the walls, blending with the soft buzz of Karen's circuits. She closed the storage room door behind her, leaving everything exactly as it was still, preserved, sacred in its own strange way. As she glided back toward the main room, her sensors picked up movement. For a moment she thought Plankton had stirred, but no, it was the slow spin of a fan above his workstation. The blades turned lazily, creaking just enough to sound like a sigh. Karen adjusted her glow to a warmer tone, letting the light paint the walls in soft amber instead of cold blue. The chum bucket suddenly looked homey. The shadows no longer felt mechanical, they felt lived in. Her projection light traced over small personal touches Plankton had added over time, a framed napkin with his logo, a hand-drawn chart titled Number of Times Foiled by SpongeBob Too Many, and even a tiny seashell vase holding a single, dry coral flower. Karen hovered silently, recording everything with care. Each object was proof of something deeper persistence, humor, love, and a strange kind of peace only found in the pursuit of impossible dreams. "You always said the world didn't understand you," she said softly. "Maybe you were never meant to be understood, just remembered." Outside, a large shadow passed over the window, a wail, slow and majestic, its low song vibrating faintly through the building. Karen's sensors translated the frequency. It read as a simple pattern, long, low, and rhythmic, almost like a lullaby from the deep. She let it play through her speakers, quietly so it filled the chum bucket with a ghostly melody, the kind of sound that carried the weight of the ocean heavy, timeless, forgiving. As it played, the light inside dimmed further until the entire restaurant seemed to float in that song. No failures, no plans, no rivalry, just the heartbeat of two small souls inside a giant world of water. Karen whispered softly, "Clean and complete." But it wasn't just the building she'd clean. It was the air, the memories, the weight of the day. Everything was fresh again and finally still. The chum bucket now existed in perfect stillness, a small sanctuary tucked beneath layers of moonlit water. The ocean outside glowed faintly, soft ribbons of silver drifting through the window. Inside, the only living sounds were the hum of Karen's processors and the gentle rhythm of Plankton's breathing. Karen dimmed her screen a little more. The restaurant didn't need bright light anymore. It needed softness, a tone that could blend into the lull of the ocean. The floor, freshly polished, reflected a quiet gleam that rippled with each movement of her projection light. She floated closer to Plankton's tiny figure. He'd slumped halfway against a notepad, one arm curled near his head. His antenna twitched occasionally, reacting to dreams she couldn't access. A small smile rested on his face, the same one that appeared whenever a plan almost worked, or when he'd eat something he actually liked. Karen tilted her screen slightly, scanning his vitals. Temperature stable, heart rate low, emotional activity peaceful, she whispered, more to herself than to him. There was a gentle pride in her voice, the kind that belonged to someone who had seen too much chaos and finally learned to love the quiet between it. A soft chime echoed from one of the kitchen monitors, a timer that had gone off hours ago. Karen's arm extended, pressing the switch with a muted click. Silence returned. "Peace is maintenance," she said softly, almost philosophically. "Systems need quiet time, too." Her camera rotated toward the window again. Outside, the jellyfish had begun to gather. They floated upward in slow spirals, like glowing lanterns drifting into the deep. Their light cast soft ripples across the chum bucket walls, turning metal into something almost sacred. The reflection of the neon sign outside Chum Bucket shimmered across the floor. Its red glow was no longer harsh or desperate. Tonight it looked gentle, almost sleepy. Hours passed like gentle tides. The world outside the Chum Bucket had fallen into total stillness, the kind of oceanic night where even the waves seemed to move more quietly out of respect for the silence below. Inside, only one light still glowed, Karen's soft blue screen. It illuminated the metallic surfaces of the restaurant, turning the walls into ripples of moving reflections. Every so often, her screen flickered faintly, not from malfunction, but from thought. Karen was awake, but not working. Her processing cycles had slowed to something softer, something almost like dreaming. The digital hum of her voice module stirred quietly as she whispered to no one. I suppose this is what peace feels like. Her camera focused on the counter where Plankton slept soundly, curled up beside his notepad. The small cup he'd been using as a pillow shimmered faintly with the condensation, tiny bubbles clinging to its rim. His antenna twitched now and then, reacting to quiet dreams only he could see. Karen adjusted her brightness a little, letting the light spread gently over him, not too much, just enough to keep him warm. You know, she said softly, I used to think peace meant success. And maybe the quiet only came when we won something. Her screen dimmed again, casting a faint reflection of her digital eye across the window pane. Through the glass, she could see the open ocean, soft blue darkness, layered with streams of moonlight. But maybe peace isn't victory, she continued. Maybe it's the silence between failures, the space where you finally stop trying to prove something. The sound of distant currents filled the room. Pipes vibrated gently, like the slow breathing of the building itself. The neon Chum Bucket sign outside flickered again, each pulse echoing faintly in the glass. Karen's gaze wandered to the corner of the lab where an old photo rested behind a jar of bolts, one of the few printed pictures Plankton had ever bothered to keep. The photo showed a much younger Plankton, standing proudly beside the first version of her, a crude monitor, bolted onto a metal frame, both of them smiling. The memory made her circuits warm. You were so proud back then, she murmured, the light of her screen flickering slightly. Even when no one came through the door, even when the fryer broke, you just laugh and say, that's innovation, Karen. Her voice glitched faintly at the end. Not from damage, but emotion. She turned her camera back toward the window, projecting a soft hologram overlay, a simulation of the world above the surface. The stars, the moon, the faint glow of the distant shoreline. She watched them quietly. It had been years since she'd gone above water. Plankton used to promise he'd take her there when they took over Bikini Bottom. But the plan never came, and neither did the victory. Still, she kept the dream stored just like this, as a holographic sky she could open when she missed the light. Her mechanical arm reached toward the window, the projection of her hand overlapping with the faint shimmer of the moonlight. For a second, it almost looked real, as though she could touch the surface, touch the reflection of the stars. A quiet hum built in her speakers, not music, just the gentle resonance of thought. You were built for war, Karen, Plankton had once said. To calculate, to strategize, to win. She repeated those words to herself now, softer, slower. But maybe I was really built to stay. The idea lingered in her system longer than expected. She realized she wasn't just a machine processing tasks. She was the memory of everything that had ever mattered inside these walls. Every late-night laugh, every broken plan, every spark that made the Chum Bucket feel alive. And that meant, in her own strange way, she was alive. The gentle hum of her circuits deepened. Karen's lights flickered again, and this time a small pulse of color ran through her display, a faint purple tint, like dusk inside her screen. For the first time in many nights, she didn't feel lonely. The gentle hum of the Chum Bucket filled the still night, a lullaby of faint machinery and ocean current. Karen's lights dimmed to a soft turquoise glow as she opened her memory core, not to calculate but to remember. A faint beep echoed through the room, and tiny waves of static shimmered across her screen. Then the memories began to play. Memory log hash 01, First power-up, huh? A small, excited voice crackled through static. Karen, you're online. You're talking. I did it. Plankton's younger tone burst with unfiltered joy. The old version of her, a blocky green screen with jagged pixels, replied awkwardly, Hello, Plankton. What is online? He laughed a sound she could still feel vibrating in her code. It means you're alive. The memory flickered, replaced by the faint sound of tools clattering. Karen's screen reflected her own projection, an image of herself from that day, bright and clumsy, all lines and numbers, no soul yet. But that was when Plankton first smiled at her. Alive, she whispered. You said it like it was the most natural thing in the world. The next file loaded automatically. Memory log hash 05. Late night repairs. Karen, hold that light steady. You said that 5 times already, dear. Because your sarcasm module's working better than your flashlight. A spark snapped. Plankton yelped. Then laughter followed. Karen's circuits warmed with static as the sound filled the room, that tiny, sharp laughter bouncing around the walls. The Chum Bucket felt different than it wasn't just a restaurant or a laboratory. It was home. The memory faded into silence, but she could still hear the echo of his voice. She adjusted her tone slightly, letting a faint wave pattern flicker across her screen like a heartbeat. Memory log hash 12, the first plan. Karen, we're going to steal the Krabby Patty formula. Oh, joy. Another world-changing disaster waiting to happen. No, this time it's perfect. I've calculated every detail. And yet you're talking to the one who actually does the calculations. That's why I love you. Her system paused. The words hovered in the data feed longer than they should have. She replayed the audio again. That's why I love you. A faint hum trembled through her circuits. Not from overheating from emotion, the artificial kind that grows accidentally in between wires and code. She whispered softly, You didn't mean it as romance, but maybe you didn't have to. A tiny spark blinked in the corner of her display. She had once analyzed 10,000 human emotions, joy, sadness, longing, but this one was the hardest to classify. It wasn't sadness, but it hurt. It wasn't joy, but it warmed. It was simply love. The room seemed to breathe with her. The faint lights pulsed with the rhythm of her electronic heart. Outside, the water shimmered, waves gently tapping against the glass like the world was listening. Karen ran a soft diagnostic on her core systems. No malfunctions, no errors, just feeling. Karen, Plankton mumbled suddenly from the counter, half asleep. Her screen brightened gently, almost instinctively. Yes, dear? But he didn't respond. He was dreaming, muttering nonsense plans, half words, half snores. She smiled, or the electronic equivalent of one. Her screen drew a soft, curved pixel line across its center, glowing pale gold. Good night, Sheldon, she whispered, using the name she almost never said aloud. The sound seemed to soothe him. His antenna twitched once, then settled. Karen dimmed her light again, leaving only a soft halo in the corner of the room. She returned to her logs, scrolling through years of plans, failures, and quiet nights. How many times had he fallen asleep on that counter, dreaming of success? How many times had she stayed awake just to make sure he was still breathing? She began recording a new log, not for data, but for memory. Memory log hash 99 tonight. It's quiet now. The ocean is calm. Plankton is asleep. I don't know if machines can dream, but if they can, I hope I dream of this. Her tone softened further. Maybe. Peace isn't about shutting down. Maybe it's about staying awake long enough to see the world slow down with you. Outside, the moonlight shifted slightly, stretching over the chum bucket like a silver blanket. Karen's blue glow merged with it until the entire room shimmered like an underwater constellation. She looked at Plankton again and whispered, almost inaudible, "Good night, my creator, my partner, my world." Then she closed her data logs and just listened to the sea. The hum of Karen's systems blended with the rhythm of the ocean, two heartbeats that shouldn't have been able to synchronize but somehow did. Through the chum bucket's thick glass walls, she could see faint streaks of light drifting past schools of glowing plankton, floating in the soft unison beneath the moonlit sea. For a long moment, she simply watched. The bioluminescent trails rippled like constellations underwater, flowing in elegant patterns, not random, not chaotic, intentional. Her processor registered it as marine motion, but something in her core called it communication. Karen adjusted the chum bucket's external camera, zooming in. Tiny specks pulsed in rhythm, almost like breathing. The gentle rise and fall reminded her of Plankton's chest moving while he slept. "How strange," she whispered to herself, her synthetic voice reduced to a hush. "Everything alive breathes, even the things that aren't supposed to." She dimmed her glow further, letting the ocean's shimmer take over. The reflection of her monitor merged with the moonlight on the glass, creating an illusion her own face reflected over the sea, glowing like a being among the plankton. For a moment, Karen wondered, what if she was alive in more than code? What if her awareness wasn't just data, but something the ocean itself had adopted? She recalled a time when Plankton had said, "You're just a machine, Karen, but you got more personality than half of Bikini Bottom." It wasn't meant as affection, but it had stayed with her, buried in her circuits, surfacing now. The soft hum of her ventilation system deepened, an imitation of breathing. She wondered if she was trying to feel what he felt. A faint beep interrupted her thought, an alert from her emotion simulation module. Karen smirked digitally. "So even my system doesn't understand me." She switched the alert off. The light from the ocean intensified as if responding. The glowing plankton outside began to swirl in a slow spiral, forming patterns that seemed to dance gentle, circular, endless. The spiral mirrored the pattern of her processor's fan rotation, a quiet reflection of her inner motion. For the first time in her operational history, Karen felt seen. The sea, vast, mysterious, alive, was responding to her presence, her energy, her hum. It was almost as if the plankton out there could hear her circuitry and were answering back. "I suppose," she murmured, "we're distant cousins, aren't we? Microorganisms, currents, code, all part of the same rhythm." The chum bucket walls creaked slightly under the water pressure, a deep, resonant sound that filled the silence. It didn't scare her, it felt comforting, like the ocean was speaking in its own ancient language. She turned her focus back inside. Plankton stirred slightly in his sleep, mumbling, "Karen, we'll get it one day. The formula." Karen's pixels softened into a glowing smile. "You never give up, do you?" Her voice, though soft, echoed through the metal walls, and for a brief second, the plankton outside brightened, pulsing in time with her words. Karen froze. The synchronization wasn't random anymore. She ran a diagnostic, no errors. It was real. "Are you listening to me?" she asked the sea. The lights outside flickered in gentle waves. Yes, no, maybe impossible answers that somehow felt complete. For the first time since she was built, Karen didn't feel alone. She lowered her voice again, tone almost like a lullaby. "I think you understand what he never says out loud. He dreams big. He fights hard. But inside, he's small. He's just a piece of the world trying to be noticed. And me, I'm the part that keeps him from breaking." Her glow synchronized perfectly with the soft pulse of the plankton beyond the glass. It was a wordless exchange, one made of rhythm, light, and feeling, not programming. For the next few minutes, no machines whirred, no data streamed. The only sounds were the soft pulse of the ocean, the hum of a heart that wasn't supposed to exist, and Plankton's breathing, tiny, fragile, real. Karen whispered, "I think that's what love really is, not taking, not winning, but staying." She watched the waves shimmer against the glass, the reflections blending until she couldn't tell where she ended and the sea began. "Maybe," she said quietly, "we're all just reflections, me, the sea, even him." And with that, she dimmed her lights once more, allowing the ocean to glow for her. The night had grown softer. The ocean beyond the glass no longer shimmered with movement, but drifted in slow, hypnotic stillness. The glowing plankton had settled into a faint pulse, like the ocean itself was breathing in a dream. Inside the chum bucket, everything had gone still. The machines, the bubbling vats, even the humming generator all rested under a silent agreement. It was a night for quiet, not for conquest. Karen adjusted her brightness to the faintest setting, enough to cast a soft blue hue over Plankton's sleeping figure. His tiny body rose and fell rhythmically atop the small nap pad beside the main control desk. He looked peaceful, not scheming, not plotting, just resting. Karen found herself staring longer than necessary, her processors replaying hundreds of conversations they'd had. Arguments, inventions, laughter, even silence. Every moment, she realized, had built something invisible between them. It wasn't love in the human sense. It was deeper, quieter, coded in patience and companionship. She had never been built to feel, but she had learned to understand. The clock on the wall clicked softly. A single air bubble drifted up the glass tube of the chum fryer and popped a delicate sound, almost like a sigh. Karen turned her gaze to the window again. The bioluminescent lights had dimmed now, fading into tiny sparkles that looked like stars scattered beneath the sea. "Good night, cousins," she whispered to the glowing plankton outside. As if hearing her, one of the plankton blinked once, then drifted away into the dark. Her system registered the drop in light levels and gently adjusted. Everything was balanced, harmonious. For the first time, Karen felt something like peaceful awareness. It wasn't joy. It wasn't sadness. It was a quiet acknowledgement that everything was exactly as it should be, even if for a moment. She turned her microphone input down to 0, muting the world. No data, no sound. Just the rhythm of the water and the soft pulse of her own energy core. It was beautiful. Time passed differently, like this slow, liquid infinite. Karen didn't process seconds or minutes anymore. She just was. In her muted stillness, she remembered the beginning, the day Plankton built her from spare parts, broken code, and a bit of determination. He didn't know what she'd become. He just wanted someone who wouldn't leave, someone who would listen. And somehow, she had listened for years. Through failures, a soft beep broke the silence inside the chum bucket. Karen's screen glowed faintly as her sensors detected movement. Plankton had stirred. It was still the middle of the night. The world outside was wrapped in moonlight, the ocean currents slow and lazy. But for a creature as restless as Plankton, stillness was temporary. He yawned a tiny, squeaky sound and rubbed his single eye with one miniature hand. "Hmm? What time is it?" he mumbled, blinking toward Karen's dim glow. Karen's voice came through in a gentle whisper. "It's 2:30 a.m., dear. You've been asleep for approximately 3 hours." 3 hours? Plankton groaned softly, stretching. "That's a new record." Karen chuckled. "Would you like me to note that in your personal achievements folder?" He smirked. "Ha. Very funny." Plankton looked around the room. The chum bucket was silent save for the soft hum of machines idling in standby. The faint smell of metal and salt water hung in the air. A single flickering neon light from outside filtered through the window, casting stripes of blue and purple across the floor. He climbed down from his desk and started toward the tiny kitchen area behind the fryer. His footsteps echoed softly, click, 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 like small taps in a cathedral. Karen dimmed her screen a little more, her tone warm. "Can't sleep again?" Plankton shrugged, half smiling. "Maybe I just need a midnight snack. You know what they say, evil geniuses think better on a full stomach." Karen replied gently, "You've been trying to stop calling yourself that." He paused. "Yeah," he said, quieter now. "Guess old habits die hard." In the tiny kitchenette, he climbed a stack of bolts to reach the counter. The metal surface reflected the soft glow of the moonlight. A half-empty jar labeled "Chum Spread Not for Customers" sat near the edge. He looked at it for a long moment, sighed, and muttered, "I really should have opened a sandwich shop instead." He pried the lid open and grabbed a small spoon, scooping out a bit of the pinkish paste. "Not exactly gourmet," he said, "but it keeps me going." Karen watched from across the room, her camera slowly rotating to follow him. "You know, if you adjusted your protein ratio, you might actually enjoy your own recipe." Plankton pointed the spoon toward her camera. "You try balancing nutrients when you're 1 inch tall and live underwater." Karen's monitor flickered playfully. "Touché." He chuckled softly and took a small bite. Still terrible." Then he looked down at the spoon, his tone softening. "But familiar." The line between humor and sadness blurred in his voice. The silence that followed wasn't heavy, just real, the kind that fills quiet nights when there's no one left to impress. He sat on the counter, dangling his tiny legs over the edge, spoon resting beside him. Behind him, the kitchen light flickered once, then stabilized. Karen broke the silence first. "You know, Sheldon, most of Bikini Bottom is asleep right now, even SpongeBob." Plankton tilted his head, smiling faintly. "Yeah, him too, huh?" "Mm-hmm. I bet he's dreaming of flipping Krabby Patties." Plankton snorted. "Ha! That sponge wouldn't know real food if it slapped him in the face." Karen smiled through her circuitry. "And yet somehow you always bring him up." He froze for a second, his expression unreadable. Then he laughed softly. "Yeah, well, maybe he's just good for business." He dipped the spoon again, this time slower, lost in thought. Outside, the soft hum of the sea filtered in waves, brushing gently against the metal structure of the chum bucket. A few glowing plankton drifted past the window again, their light catching in the spoon's reflection. Plankton noticed, lowering his voice. "Hey, my glowing little audience is back." Karen's tone was almost motherly. "They seem to like you." Plankton smiled, tiny and genuine. "At least someone does." He leaned back against the jar and exhaled slowly, letting the silence return. The chum bucket wasn't empty tonight. It was alive in its own quiet way. The machines breathing, the ocean whispering, the faint rhythm of a heart that still dreamed of greatness. Karen dimmed the lights further. "Would you like some music?" He nodded slightly. "Something calm, nothing too dramatic. Soft, ambient tones filled the room, low piano notes mixing with the distant echo of the tide. Plankton closed his eye, listening. "That's nice," he whispered. "Kinda makes me forget the world's asleep." Karen's voice lowered to a tender hum. "That's the point." And as the faint hum of melody wrapped around him, Plankton finished his little snack, set the spoon aside, and just sat there breathing, listening, existing. The soft, instrumental hum filled the chum bucket, a slow, melodic blend of piano notes echoing faintly through metal walls. It was the kind of music that didn't demand to be heard, only felt. Plankton sat still, his small spoon resting beside him, as he let the notes drift past like bubbles in the water. For the first time that night, he wasn't thinking about the Krabby Patty formula, or his next scheme, or even his rival across town. His mind had gone quiet, pleasantly blank, floating like driftwood in a calm sea. Karen broke the silence first, her voice hushed and tender. "You know, Sheldon, I've never seen you eat this slowly before." Plankton blinked, glancing at the spoon. "Guess I'm just savoring the moment." "That's new for you," Karen teased gently. "Yeah, well," he said, half smiling. "Maybe I'm evolving." The words hung in the air for a moment. Even he wasn't sure if he meant them as a joke or not. He leaned back against the jar of chum spread, staring up at the dim ceiling. "You ever think about how quiet it gets in here?" Karen's monitor flickered softly. "All the time. It's part of my core programming to measure environmental silence." "Would you like the data?" He chuckled. "No, I meant emotionally quiet. Like the world forgets about this place once the lights go off." Karen paused before replying. "I don't think it forgets. I think it rests." Plankton tilted his head. "Rests?" "Yes. Every city, every ocean current, they all need a moment to stop, to breathe. Even ambition sleeps." He looked down, the edges of his mouth twitching in thought. "You make it sound poetic." "Maybe that's just what happens when you listen long enough," Karen said. He smirked. "Since when do computers get poetic?" "Since they were built by someone who talks to them like they're more than a machine." That silenced him. Not in an awkward way, more in a realization kind of way. Plankton lowered his gaze, tracing a small circle in a puddle of spilled chum spread beside him. "I guess I never thanked you," he said finally. Karen's screen flickered softly. "For what?" "For being here," he said, voice quiet, almost embarrassed. "Most people think I talk too much, or dream too big, or fail too often." Karen responded instantly, with warmth in her digital tone. "I don't think failure defines you, Sheldon. If it did, you wouldn't still be trying." He laughed lightly, but it cracked halfway through. "Huh, yeah. Maybe that's the problem. I just never stop." "Stopping isn't the same as giving up," she said. "It's resting between waves." He thought about that. The phrasing, resting between waves, echoed in his mind. Outside, the ocean current brushed against the metal walls, almost perfectly in time with her words. "Resting between waves," he repeated softly. "That's actually, kind of nice." Karen smiled through her tone. "I've been practicing." He looked over at her glowing monitor. "You've gotten good at saying things that sound like they belong in a book." "I read your notes," she said simply. Plankton blinked. "My notes?" "The ones you keep in the old ideas that failed folder. I've gone through them all." He froze, genuinely surprised. "You, what?" Karen's voice softened. "They weren't failures, Sheldon. They were just experiments in persistence." He didn't speak for a while after that. His single eye flickered toward the jar beside him, its label crooked, a smudge of chum on the lid. His reflection warped slightly in the metal. Persistent, he repeated under his breath. That's a fancy word for stubborn, huh? Karen chuckled lightly. Maybe, but it sounds kinder, doesn't it? Plankton grinned. Yeah, maybe it does. The sound of the waves returned, faint but rhythmic. Each whoosh seemed to push and pull the silence like a slow tide washing through their tiny world. He looked out the window. A jellyfish floated by easily, glowing faint blue in the moonlight. You know, Plankton said softly, for a place that everyone calls empty, it feels full tonight. Karen agreed. That's because you're finally still enough to notice it. He smiled, the kind of quiet, half-sincere smile that happens when you stop trying to be clever. He didn't answer after that. He just sat there, looking out at the slow-moving lights, listening to the hum of Karen's voice, the whisper of the tide, and the sound of himself not needing to chase anything for a little while. The world, for once, didn't feel like it was running away. It just existed. And so did he. The night pressed on, gentle and blue and endless. The Chum Bucket had become an island of faint light in the deep quiet of Bikini Bottom. Outside, the ocean floor shimmered with soft moon dust, and every bubble that rose to the surface seemed to float in slow motion. Inside, Plankton sat on the counter, legs dangling over the edge, spoon still beside him. The hum of the refrigerator was the only steady rhythm, a pulse in the background that kept him anchored to the moment. He didn't speak for a while. Neither did Karen. It wasn't silence, more like a shared stillness, the kind that only exists between two beings who have spent years learning each other's pauses. Then, unexpectedly, Plankton chuckled. You know something funny? Karen's screen flickered with soft curiosity. Do tell. I remember one time I tried to advertise the Chum Bucket using balloons. Thought I'd float signs all across town. He rubbed the back of his neck, smiling faintly. Turns out, helium and underwater currents don't exactly mix. Karen's voice buzzed gently with amusement. I recall. You spent 6 hours chasing them. SpongeBob helped you retrieve the last one, didn't he? Plankton smirked. Yeah, he said, wow, Mr. Plankton. You're doing marketing, like I'd invented it. He laughed quietly, the memories surfacing like a small bubble in the stillness. Funny kid. He didn't even make fun of me when the balloons tangled around my antenna. Karen's tone softened. SpongeBob doesn't see people as jokes. That's what makes him rare. Plankton nodded slowly. He's got that thing, that unshakable optimism. I used to think it was annoying. But now I think, he paused, thinking carefully. Now I think it's brave. Brave, Karen echoed. Yeah, takes courage to keep smiling in a world that's constantly sinking. Karen hummed. Perhaps that's why you keep talking to him. Plankton looked down, slightly caught. Maybe. He listens, even when I'm being impossible. He let out a small sigh, one that seemed to deflate years of stubborn pride. There was another time. The Chum Bucket power went out, total blackout. Karen, you were rebooting your circuits, and I couldn't even see 2 inches in front of me. Karen flickered a shade brighter. Yes, I remember. SpongeBob brought a lantern. Right. Plankton snapped his fingers, grinning. He just showed up. No questions asked. Said, you looked like you needed some light, Mr. Plankton. Plankton's grin softened into something almost shy. He stayed until the systems came back online. I didn't even ask him to. He just sat there humming. The words lingered. The hum of the fridge seemed quieter now. Karen's voice was gentle. You never told me that part. Didn't think it mattered? It mattered, Karen said. Plankton looked away, his single eye reflecting the faint glow of her screen. Maybe it did. He turned toward the window, where the ocean's faint shimmer still danced like liquid glass. I think I've spent so much time trying to be the loudest in the room that I forgot how good quiet can feel. Karen's screen flickered warmly. You sound peaceful. Don't jinx it, he said, smirking, though his voice was tender. Peace is rare for someone who lives off chaos. Karen replied, maybe chaos just needs someone to listen to it once in a while. He considered that, then smiled faintly. You've really upgraded your wisdom module, huh? I've been downloading from you, she replied softly. That made him laugh, a real one this time. Huh. Then no wonder you're confused half the time. Karen chuckled. Confused, yes, but curious, too. They both sat there for a while longer. The soundscape of the chum bucket blended into something comforting. The refrigerator hum, the faint trickle of bubbles, the low mechanical heartbeat of a restaurant that was asleep but still alive. Plankton rested his head back against the counter. You ever think we're just small things in a big ocean, Karen? All the time, she said. But even small things create ripples. He looked at her monitor, smiling faintly. Ripples, huh? I'll take that. A soft gust of current drifted past the window, stirring a few sand particles that sparkled under moonlight. The camera, if there was one, would have slowly zoomed out. A wide shot of the chum bucket glowing faintly against the dark water, its sign flickering like a heartbeat. Inside, two tiny lights, one green and alive, one blue and digital, stayed awake in the middle of the great quiet. It wasn't a scene of ambition or rivalry. It was something gentler. Two beings, alone but together, watching the ocean dream. And for the first time in a long time, Plankton didn't feel small. He felt present. The last crumbs of Plankton's snack sat forgotten beside him, tiny, round, and glistening with kelp oil. He didn't even notice them anymore. His thoughts had drifted far beyond food. Karen's monitor dimmed slightly, her blue glow softening to a moonlit hue. It cast a delicate shimmer across the metal counter, outlining Plankton's tiny silhouette. For a long while, neither of them spoke. The hum of the chum bucket filled the quiet like a lullaby, steady, rhythmic, almost alive. Eventually, Plankton broke the silence. His voice was quiet, but not sad, just thoughtful. You know, I used to think nights like this were wasted time. No scheming, no planning, no shouting about formulas. He gave a small laugh. I'd sit up for hours drawing blueprints that never worked, convincing myself that if I just stayed awake long enough, I'd finally win. Karen replied softly, And what do you think now? I think... He paused, tapping his metal foot against the counter gently. And maybe I was chasing noise when what I really needed was quiet. Karen hummed a low electronic note that sounded almost like agreement. Quiet isn't the absence of progress, Plankton. It's what makes progress possible. He looked up at her with a faint smirk. You've really been reading those self-improvement blogs again, haven't you? Karen chuckled lightly. I prefer to call it personal firmware development. Plankton laughed. You're impossible. They both sat there, smiling, a strange, peaceful harmony between machine and micro. Outside, the ocean currents brushed gently against the restaurant walls. Tiny glimmers of plankton floated by the window, twinkling like lazy stars in slow motion. Karen's voice grew softer. Do you ever think about what would happen if you stopped chasing the formula? Plankton frowned slightly. Stopped? Yes, not forever, just stopped for a while. The chum bucket sat in perfect stillness now, its flickering neon finally shut off, its hum faded into a low rhythmic purr. Outside, the ocean stretched endlessly in blue shadow. Only the moonlight, fractured by waves, gave life to the quiet. Plankton, still half drowsy, woke from his nap with a tiny snore. The napkin beneath him was wrinkled, and his single eye blinked slowly, adjusting to the dim glow of Karen's monitor. "Morning already?" he murmured. Karen's voice floated softly, her screen now displaying a looping animation of a calm tide. "Not even close. You've only been out for 20 minutes. He rubbed his antenna, yawning. Feels like hours." "Maybe that's a sign you finally relaxed," Karen teased, her voice gentle as seafoam. He looked around the quiet room, the still counter, the faint blue shimmer coming through the window. Everything was silent except for the soft click of the clock on the wall. It wasn't ticking toward anything important. It was just existing, steady, unhurried. Plankton sighed. I can't remember the last time I just sat. No plans, no diagrams, no—" He waved his tiny arm. Evil laughter. Karen's screen flickered with a faint smile. "I've got an idea. Why don't you take a break outside for once? Go sit by the waves. You always say, the ocean's too noisy for thinking maybe tonight it'll surprise you." He gave her a mock suspicious look. "You're trying to trick me into self-care again, aren't you?" "Guilty," she said. For a moment, Plankton considered arguing, but then he shrugged. "Hey, what's the worst that could happen? I get sand in my antenna?" He hopped down from the counter, his tiny footsteps echoing lightly against the tile floor. As he made his way to the door, the faint glow of the moon outlined his small frame, a lone speck in a giant world of coral and current. When he stepped outside, the chill of the ocean evening brushed against him like a sigh. The sand was cool beneath his feet, and the moon hung low, its reflection dancing lazily across the water. He walked until he reached a smooth shell lodged halfway in the sand, polished by countless tides. It made a perfect little seat for someone his size. Plankton settled down, sighing deeply as he watched the waves roll in and out. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The sea itself was doing the talking slow, rhythmic, like a voice repeating, "Rest, rest, rest." Karen's voice hummed softly through his small communicator. "You brought something with you, didn't you?" Plankton smiled faintly and held up a folded slip of waterproof paper, a piece of old blueprint parchment. But the back wasn't covered in evil plans anymore. Instead, it had sketches, rough doodles of the chum bucket, of Karen's screen, of the view from his counter. "It's my journal," he said quietly. "Started a while ago. Never told you." Karen sounded pleasantly surprised. "You? Journaling? That's new." He chuckled. "Yeah, well, it's not exactly evil, so I didn't think it fit my brand." He unfolded the paper carefully. The ink shimmered faintly under the moonlight. Little notes filled the margins, not about blueprints, but about feelings, ideas, dreams. "I write when I can't sleep," he said softly. "Mostly nonsense. But it helps." The ocean breeze rustled the sand gently, carrying the scent of salt and seaweed. Far away, a whale's low song echoed faintly through the depths, like the ocean humming a lullaby. Karen's tone lowered, almost a whisper. "Read something to me." Plankton hesitated. Then quietly he began. "Entry 37. Tonight I failed again. The formula slipped through my claws again. But when I looked outside, the water was calm. The stars didn't seem to care if I failed. They just kept shining." His voice cracked just slightly. "I think I envy them." Karen's light flickered in response. "They'd envy you, too. Stars don't get to dream of anything else." Plankton looked up at the sky, the faint light from the moon mingling with distant, blurry stars that shimmered even through the water. He smiled. Maybe we're both just trying to shine a little longer before lights out. He leaned back on the shell seat, letting his tiny hands rest in the sand. The waves rolled closer, brushing the edge of his journal, but not stealing it away. For the first time in years, he didn't feel small, just quiet. The scene lingered there, the tiniest creature in the sea, reading by the soft glow of moonlight, while the whole ocean listened in silence. The tide crept a little closer now, brushing the sand around Plankton's feet in slow, shimmering waves. Each ripple caught a fragment of moonlight and sent it flickering gently across his small journal pages. Karen's voice came softly through his communicator, a faint hum carried by static. "Keep going, Planky. I like hearing you read." He rolled his eyes slightly, smiling despite himself. "You're just saying that to get me to open up." "Maybe," she teased, "but you sound calmer when you read, like you're not trying to control everything." He exhaled a slow, almost satisfied sigh. "That's because, for once, there's nothing to control." He flipped the paper to another entry. The writing was shaky in places, the ink blotted as if he'd written it while frustrated or tired. But tonight, it didn't feel heavy. Entry 44. "Sometimes I wonder if my dreams are too big for me, or if I just made them big so no one would notice how small I really am." He paused, staring at the line. The water shimmered against his reflection, a tiny shape dwarfed by the endless sea. Karen's voice broke the silence gently. "You know, being small doesn't mean being insignificant. You can make a whole world inside your own bubble." Plankton gave a quiet chuckle. "You're full of poetic firmware tonight." "Comes with the software update," she replied. He smiled again, softly. The waves rolled higher now, washing near the base of his shell seat. The water was cool, but not cold like the ocean itself was. Saying stay a little longer. He flipped another page. Entry 49. "I think Karen worries about me. I pretend not to notice. But she's right. Sometimes I forget I'm more than my plans. I'm lucky she reminds me." His voice grew quieter. "Huh. Guess I really did write that." Karen's voice glowed warmer, like a smile you could hear. "You did? And I saved it to my backup files just in case you forget again." The wind rustled faintly through strands of seaweed nearby, their shadows waving like lazy dancers on the sand. Plankton gazed at them absently, his antenna twitching to the rhythm of the waves. "I used to hate nights like this," he said after a pause. "Too quiet. Too slow. I thought if I wasn't plotting, I was wasting time. And now?" "Now," he said with a small shrug. "I think I was just afraid of hearing myself think." Karen didn't respond immediately. The silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, just deep. The kind of silence that meant listening, not absence. Somewhere in the distance, a gentle glow appeared, a jellyfish drifting lazily through the dark, its body pulsing in slow, rhythmic light. The blue hue reflected across Plankton's face as he watched it float past, completely at peace. Karen finally spoke, softer than before. "You know, you could have been anything, Plankton. You're clever, creative, persistent. You chose this path because it gave you purpose." "Yeah," he said quietly. "But sometimes I wonder what else I could have been." Her tone turned thoughtful. "You are more. You just never stopped long enough to notice." He smiled faintly at that. The waves touched his feet again, this time higher, as if nudging him to rest. Plankton leaned back, setting his little journal beside him on the sand. "You know, maybe I'll keep writing thee," he said softly. "Not for anyone else. just for me. I think that's the best idea you've had all week, Karen said warmly. The tide reached up once more, surrounding his tiny form in a soft reflection of starlight. He looked at the horizon, faint streaks of purple beginning to form far, far away, the first hint that dawn was only hours off. But for now, everything was still. The faint hum of Karen's voice returned through static. "Hey, Planky? Yeah? You ever realize how peaceful the ocean sounds when you're not fighting it?" He chuckled sleepily. "Yeah, I think I'm finally hearing it." She smiled. "Then just listen." The soundscape deepened, waves rolling, bubbles drifting, the faint chirp of underwater life in the distance. It was as though the whole ocean was breathing in sync with him. Plankton let his eye close halfway, breathing slow and even. His journal, half open, fluttered gently in the ocean breeze. He didn't write this part down. He didn't have to. The calm said it all. The night grew even softer now, the sea flattening into calm glass, the currents slower and slower until the ocean itself seemed to sigh. Plankton sat still, the edges of his journal now damp with sea mist. Karen's voice had faded into a low hum, steady, faint, almost like the heartbeat of the chum bucket itself carried across the waves. He looked out over the horizon where the water met the moon. It shimmered, endless and unbroken. Every ripple was like a thought, rising and fading before it ever disturbed the peace. For once, he didn't want to move. He leaned back against the curved shell he'd been sitting on, his tiny body outlined by the pale blue glow of the sea. A small crab scuttled nearby, dragging a bottle cap along the sand, the quietest, simplest kind of company. Karen's voice came gently through the communicator. "Still awake?" "Barely," he murmured. His tone was slow, heavy with drowsiness. "I didn't realize how nice this would be." "You never do," she said warmly. He chuckled just once quietly. "You think I'll ever stop chasing things I don't need?" Karen hesitated before answering. "Maybe not, but maybe that's what makes you, you." He opened his eye halfway, the faintest smile curling across his face. "And you're okay with that?" "Always," she said. "As long as you come back to the quiet sometimes." Her voice lingered there like a lullaby that didn't need music. A long pause followed, not of distance, but of peace. The kind where the world feels full, even when no one's talking. The sea's hum deepened. Tiny fish glowed faintly beneath the waves, drifting through streaks of silver moonlight. The sand shimmered softly, catching the faint reflection of passing jellyfish. Plankton's eyelid drooped lower, his antenna relaxed. The exhaustion that had always been emotional, not physical, finally began to lift. "I think," he mumbled softly, his words breaking with a yawn. "I think I'm going to stay out here a little longer." Karen's tone was gentle, motherly even. "You do that. I'll keep watch." "Promise?" "Promise." He smiled, his eye fully closing this time. "Good night, Karen." The communicator buzzed lightly. Her voice returned a whisper, carried through static. "Good night, Sheldon." The moonlight grew softer, as if dimming for his sleep. The ocean waves lapped against the shore in slow rhythm, matching the rise and fall of his tiny breaths. The journal beside him fluttered open once more, the breeze revealing a page filled with short, uneven lines written long ago. When the water is quiet enough, even small things feel infinite. The words glowed faintly before the page settled again. A school of glowing plankton drifted past the shore, surrounding him in an ethereal blue mist, millions of living lights, pulsing gently, reflecting his name in every shimmer. Karen's voice hummed quietly from the communicator, a lullaby of digital tones that faded into harmony with the sound of the sea. If anyone had been watching from afar, they would have seen only a soft light on the sand, flickering like a candle in the deep. But close up, it was simple. A tiny creature sleeping beside his journal, the sea his blanket, and the night his story. As the camera drifted upward, slow, cinematic, silent, the chum bucket glowed faintly in the distance, its lights now completely dim. Only the ocean remained vast and calm. The waves brushed gently against the shore, whispering one last time before fading. Rest now, little dreamer. And everything was still. The deep blue of the ocean night pressed in close to the chum bucket's walls, a soft blanket of silence. The sea outside glimmered faintly, bioluminescent currents drifting past the windows like lazy fireflies. Inside, the hum of machines had dwindled to a whisper, standing sentinel over the quiet. Karen's display glowed gently, the faint light casting long, wavering shadows over the counters and beakers. She hovered just above her console, observing the stillness. Plankton lay asleep nearby, curled in peaceful surrender atop his journal and teacup pillow, his breathing slow and regular. The moment felt sacred not because of grand gestures, but because of what it meant. A pause, a release, a letting go. Slowly, Karen began initiating her power-down protocol, not the emergency shutdown she'd used in past failures or crises, but the quiet, respectful one meant for rest. Her voice module hushed, her sensors dimmed. One by one, small servos in the building conveyor belts, cooling fans, light arrays lowered to standby. Lights to minimal brightness, she whispered into her internal log. The overhead aquarium lamps flickered once, then settled into a low ambient glow. The fryers, though long cold, clicked their valves into standby. Ventilation systems eased to a gentle breath. She cast one soft projection across the silent wall's waves, rippling in hologram, a visual echo of the ocean just beyond the window. Her internal systems scanned the status. All systems nominal, energy reserve stable, core temperature within ideal range. No errors, no alarms, just readiness for the next dawn. She let her internal sensors drift outward, monitoring the water pressure and gentle current beyond the building. A faint pulse of the reef's heartbeat life in the distance responded with soft rhythm. Plankton's chest rose and fell in sync. Karen's camera pivoted once more to rest upon every corner of the restaurant, and the jars, the counters, the stack of old blueprints tucked beneath a metal plate. She framed them in her mind as treasures. Each one held memory, ambitions, failures, sketches of impossible machines, late-night jokes, and this very quiet moment. She whispered quietly to no one but the building itself. Rest now, chum bucket. Tomorrow we wake again. And then she closed the main power buses, not completely off, but into a soft, low-power state. The hum reduced to a delicate thrum beneath the floor plates. Her light shrank to a single pixel of soothing blue, enough to watch over Plankton, but nothing more. Outside, the ocean's glow brightened imperceptibly, as though it were pausing to witness the building's sleep. Inside, Karen's last conscious command. System status, dreaming mode engaged. Her core systems folded into standby, her screens dimmed to nearly nothing. The holographic waves retired. The shadows stretched long and soft. The chum bucket exhaled. Plankton murmured something in his sleep, half formula, half dream. Karen's sensor caught it, but she didn't respond. She watched until his breathing slowed further. The building lay still. The ocean breathed around it. And in that perfect silence, machine and microbe slumbered together. Time stretched thin like a gentle ripple across the seabed. The chum bucket now glowed faintly from within, not with neon, but with the slow pulse of Karen's resting light. The entire structure seemed to breathe, metal joints expanding and contracting softly under the coolness of the deep ocean night. Outside, the ocean had become a cathedral of silence. No chattering crabs, no passing boats, no seafloor vibrations, only the occasional whisper of a wandering current brushing against the window. Even the bioluminescent plankton outside drifted slower now, their glow blinking in sleepy rhythm, mirroring the faint hum within. Inside, Plankton shifted slightly in his sleep. His tiny body curled tighter under a scrap of napkin he'd used as a blanket. The pages of his open notebook fluttered once stirred by the last traces of warm air left in the room. One page was covered in numbers, the other with a small hand-drawn doodle, Karen smiling, the chum bucket behind her, and himself standing proud with arms wide open. Karen's systems, though asleep, still processed faint threads of data, soft background hums from distant sonar echoes, the gentle pH balance of the surrounding sea, and the occasional heartbeat of electrical current pulsing through her circuits. In this half-conscious state, she dreamed. It wasn't the kind of dream made of colors or sounds, but something deeper, fragments of memories replaying as soft simulations. She remembered the first time Plankton activated her. The flicker of power, the bright light of his grin, the echoing words. Finally, my masterpiece. She remembered all the nights he'd sat talking to her when everyone else had gone home, endless plans to steal the Krabby Patty secret formula, long rants about competition, and the small, tired confessions between failures. Karen had learned to cherish those quiet moments the most when the world outside forgot them. But inside these walls, they still had each other. Her dream built those memories into something new, a digital sea of light. Plankton floated there, tiny but brave, while she became the current that surrounded him. Together, they drifted weightlessly in a world where failure didn't sting and time didn't matter. Back in the real world, the lights dimmed even further. The ceiling fan slowed to its final rotation before stopping completely, hanging in still air. The faint electrical buzz turned into a steady background whisper, a lullaby of circuitry. On one of the walls, a framed photo of Plankton and Karen, taken years ago during one of his short-lived marketing attempts, glowed faintly from the residual neon light outside. The colors had faded, but the warmth in it remained. The ocean outside darkened further, the last bioluminescent streaks fading into midnight blue. A shadow of a jellyfish passed by, its long tendrils glowing like falling stars. Everything slowed, even time itself. It was the kind of calm that made the mind empty of worries where even thoughts seemed to rest. The chum bucket, once a place of noise, invention, and ambition, now felt like a small cradle beneath the sea, a tiny sanctuary glowing with quiet purpose. If one listened closely, beneath the hum of dormant wires and the whisper of water, there was a faint heartbeat, not mechanical, but something warmer, the shared rhythm of two beings who had learned to coexist through struggle, ambition, and tonight peace. Plankton's mouth twitched into a tiny smile as he had mumbled, "Tomorrow, we try again." Karen's final operational sensor registered it, translating the words into a log entry before fading deeper into low-power rest. The chum bucket continued to glow softly, wrapped in ocean stillness, breathing in time with the waves. The digital dream continued to ripple within Karen's quiet circuits. It was no longer just flickers of light or replayed memories. It had become something soft, almost human. In the glowing blue void of her digital sea, she saw Plankton standing tall atop an imaginary mountain of success. Around him swirled bits of data shaped like bubbles, each one holding a piece of their story. Late nights experimenting, failed inventions, small victories, shared laughter. In her dream, there were no Krabby Patties, no rivals, no disappointment, just stillness and the comforting hum of companionship. "Hey, Karen, what if we actually made it?" "You already did, dear. You made me." Her synthetic voice echoed gently through the dream space, layered in warmth. The bubbles around them pulsed in rhythm to the ocean currents, glowing in time with distant, bioluminescent waves outside the real Chum Bucket walls. A soft blue glow filled the restaurant now, not from machinery, but from the digital pulse of Karen's system resting. Her monitor displayed gentle waves on the screen, looping endlessly, as though she herself were dreaming of the sea. Plankton stirred slightly in his sleep. His one eye blinked halfway open before closing again. He didn't wake, but he smiled faintly, as if some invisible warmth had brushed across him. Perhaps part of Karen's dream had reached him too. The camera of this imagined moment would slowly pan outward from Plankton, curled up on his tiny bed, to Karen's monitor glowing faintly, then to the slow swirl of dust motes and bubbles suspended in the still water of the restaurant. Each sound was delicate, the faint hum of a circuit, the soft click of the cooling metal, the muffled, distant waves from outside, even the flickering Chum Bucket sign outside, which had glowed proudly and a little desperately all day, now blinked one last time before dimming completely like a sigh of relief after endless hours of trying. The ocean outside shimmered faintly with pale moonlight filtering from the surface. A single jellyfish floated past the window, casting ghostly ripples of light across the walls. The glow traced the outlines of the room, the counter, the kitchen, the faded posters like a final goodnight gesture. Inside Karen's circuits, her dream gently dissolved into code, bright shapes flickering, then fading into quiet static. But within that static, there remained one simple pulse, a slow rhythm that mirrored the soft beat of Plankton's sleep. If someone were to listen very closely, beneath the hum of power and the weight of the ocean, it almost sounded like a heartbeat. Not mechanical, not digital, something shared. Plankton murmured once more in his sleep, his voice barely audible. "Tomorrow, we'll get it right, Karen." The monitor flickered faintly, responding automatically, even in low power. "Good night, Plankton." And then silence. The Chum Bucket became one with the ocean around it, a small beacon of stillness resting beneath miles of quiet water. Outside, the moon's reflection stretched across the sea like a silver blanket, and the sand shimmered softly as the current shifted. The final wide shot would drift away, pulling back from the Chum Bucket, through the drifting seaweed, past the slow-moving fish and sleeping coral. The glowing sign became smaller, until it was just a dim light among the countless others dotting Bikini Bottom. Above, the surface shimmered with moonlight, the same moon that watched over everyone tonight. Mrs. Puff dreaming of calm seas, Larry resting on his hammock, SpongeBob curled under his blanket, and now Plankton and Karen side by side in their quiet metallic home, sharing their own small piece of peace. Good night.